Alrighty. I want to do another one on one of the eccentric people I've known. It was a friend of my uncle's who was essentially what they call a 10-pound pom over here. Now, these 10-pound poms basically are born in England and then have come to Australia in the 60s or whatever, 50s, after the war. And Bob Lee was, a year younger than my uncle, and he came over here when he was 10 years old. Anyways, he's since passed away. For all the things he got up to, he died of motor neurone disease. And for all the things he got up to, it was a wonder he didn't get blown up, shot, something or other else, because he had a very interesting life. He was an oil rigger. Now, he worked in the North Sea, in Scotland, Saudi Arabia, many, many years, about 8 years in Libya, quite a while in Nigeria, and also Queensland, which is up in the northeast here in Australia. Yeah, plenty of time on offshore rigs, onshore stuff. He even mentioned when he was in Libya, he was working on a power station, and you know, there were people, Arabs out in the desert, and the highest technology these people would have seen, these, you know, peasant Arabs basically, he reckons the highest technology they would have seen would have been a watch, and he said here they were building this great big power station. Yeah, it was, he spent a lot of time in Malta on his time off when he was working in Libya. And he used to go back to England on occasion, but he spent a lot of time in Australia as well. And he sort of had it was like a sort of very clear, sort of pronounced accent. It was sort of Australian, but it was sort of a bit clear and pronounced, sort of slightly British in a way. But anyway, I'll tell you some of the things that happened to him. Now, well, I suppose the first one I'll say is Nigeria. He was in Nigeria, and there was some sort of a civil war or whatever. And he was in a pub and you know, had a few too many beers, and these blokes said, oh, you know, people getting ready to go home, or the pub was closing or something like that. I'm thinking, oh, who's going that way? Yeah, no worries, I'll hop in you with you and all that, you know. Yeah, we'll give you a lift, mate, these black blokes said to him. And his judgment wasn't too great. And basically, they started driving in the opposite direction from where they were supposed to be taking him. Anyway, the roads there are sort of built up on these great big mounds of sand. I assume they were going through a desert area or something like that. And they were going about 80 k's an hour, which is, you know, it's going all right. It's, yeah, not slow. And he basically opened the door and jumped out and cartwheeled down the side of this big sand embankment that the road was built on. While he was going 80 kilometres an hour, mind you, because he was in the back seat anyway, he thought, bugger this. So he got up, shook the dust off himself, and he went to the opposite side of the road to catch a ride for another car going back. Anyway, a car slows up, so he hops in the back, and then they take off, and no sooner does he realise he's hopped back in with the same blokes. So he done the same thing again. Opened the door and went down, cartwheeling out, and that time I think they weren't terribly fast, might only been 40 or 60 k's an hour, but same thing again, tumbling down the side of the sand. And then after that he walked back to the city, but he could sort of hear these villagers' dogs, which are half blimmin' wolf, who knows what blimmin' things. You know, I think there's a bit of hyena and all that. And they were all yelping and carrying on. He's worried that one of those might come out and have a go at him. But at the same time, he didn't want to get too close back to the road in case the blokes picked up where he was again. And in the end, he sort of got in closer to the city. And there's a bloke and his son in a big rig. And he gave him a ride right back and brought him right up to the front door of the hotel. I mean, he drove right into the car park of the blooming hotel with his big rig. and dropped him off. And he said, I gave him every single coin I had, every single note and coin I had in my pocket. And he said, I probably gave the bloke, 6 months' wage, 6 months of his wage in one hit. But he said, we just got paid out for the finishing of this oil job, and he said, I just handed the blooming lot over. And he said, the old bloke, he's probably got 6 months or more of wage in one hit. The bloke driving the truck, so it was all his Christmases come at once. But it doesn't end there. He worked as a security guard also in Ireland. He was a security guard in a large mall. And anyway, boss said to him, okay, it's time for your break over the little radios they had. And then no worries. So he goes off. And he walks up to this pub to have a canter meal. And he said he literally, walked out of the mall and walked for 5 minutes up to this pub. And he got to this pub and they were saying there's been a bombing at this mall. And it's like, oh, you heard there's a bombing at this mall. It was just on the radio. And he said, bullshit. He said, I was there 5 minutes ago. There's no bombing or anything. And he said, no, it's on the radio. And of course it come over, again, or change the channel or whatever. And yeah, there was a bombing there. Anyway, he said he had lunch and whatever, and had lunch and sort of didn't believe it, I think, really. And he went back to the mall and he said the cops were swarming all over the joint. And, and all that. And it was basically, I think he might have been told, okay, that's it, time to go home or something like that. Or they might have just decided to close the mall for the day or whatever. And he said the flipping hole, the IRA had basically put a car bomb out the front of this mall in this square right beside the mall or something like this, and it had blown a hole that deep. He said you could have slid 2 cars, full-size vehicles, 5 metres long, 2 of them end to end, and he said you could have slipped them in the hole, bumper to bumper, and he said you wouldn't have seen them sticking out. He said it was about 2.5 car lengths long. Ran about 12 metres, 12.5 metres deep, the crater left by this car bomb that the IRA set off there. And he walked out of that. Well, that was back in the 80s, but many years passed, and in around, when was it? Somewhere between 2003 and 2005 or something like that. I can't really remember. It was after September 11 anyway. Now, he was in Saudi Arabia. Things were, normal as usual. The company had a apartment building that they, put the oil workers in, and you had your own little apartment, and it was quite a good job. You actually got your own pickup truck and your own apartment, and no speed limits, and he used to drive that thing like a bat out of hell, apparently. Big GMC pickup truck. Anyway, things were going as usual. Just another day at the oil rig and all that. And things went a little bit AWOL, and what basically happened is, I'm not full up on the details of the initial thing, but they killed 2 of the American executives and 1 British executive who was running that oil project, and then while he was in his apartment after work, they decided to take a whole bunch of people hostage on the ground floor in this apartment building that he was in. It made news over here. It made the newspaper here. And basically the ceiling of the ground floor, they rigged the whole lot with explosives, and I mean, she was for real. Everything was wired up. It was all wired up correctly. She was ready to go. And they basically said that, we want you to release a couple of people who have been charged with terrorism, basically, because these were Al-Qaeda operatives who'd done this. Anyway, they didn't want anyone near the building or whatnot, but the Saudi special ops could see what was going on from about 1.5 kilometres away with a bit of optical equipment, and they were watching the joint all the time, And anyway, they finally said, well, we'll come out and we'll let the hostages go. But they'd done that old stunt that you may have heard of this if you've been in the military, where they have all the people, the hostages around them, and then they run out. Well, anyway, something like 2 of the blokes got away, and another 3 or 4 got shot, and the ringleader got shot real bad and he died. And the other ones, I don't even know if they survived. They got shot and were in intensive care, but I don't know if they survived. And it was all over, but he was stuck in that apartment for around about 3 days as a result of that. And he used to, when he was here, he used to drive flat knacker. I mean, when he was driving, you know, it'd be 100 miles an hour, literally 100 miles an hour wherever. You know, the speed limit would be 60 miles. He'd be driving 100. You know, he was flat out, and he used to always say, "Oh, I'll probably die driving like a bat out of hell. I'll probably die," and then they go, "Oh, well, he drove like a bat out of hell. What do you expect?" Blah blah blah. You know, and he assumed that he'd probably kill himself with his driving because he was also up for so many different DUI offences, you know, drink driving offences, that basically he was on the last thing for his licence, and he was probably going to be on a life ban if he had one more drinking offence. He rolled multiple vehicles, including putting one in a ditch that my uncle still got out the back here. It's not too badly damaged, but the suspension, there's a bit of a few new parts, but you know, he sort of wiped out that many vehicles. It wasn't funny, and I used to see all those photos of different vehicles he'd wiped out. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, he went to start his car one day, and he didn't sort of have enough strength in his fingers to turn the key. And it was motor neurone disease. And after drinking something chronic, after surviving, you know, getting out of a bombing a few minutes in advance and 2 hostage situations, and driving 100 miles an hour everywhere and drinking like a fish, at the end of the day, he died of motor neurone disease. You know, I mean, that's like being Napoleon and then dying of tripping over the cat. You know, honestly, it was hard to believe. But after my uncle died, about a year later, my dad said, "Oh, we should see what's going on with Bob," and that, and rang his sister up and said, "Well, he's actually in care now, in an aged care facility, and he's not very well." And he said, "Oh, God," and the sister went on a bit, and then he thought a month later, "No, stuff it, I want to find out what aged care facility he's in." And he rang back a month later, and it was too late. He'd already died. But yeah, I think of old Bob sometimes. He was a funny old character. He used to swear a fair bit too, but he was an eccentric person, and of all the things he avoided getting killed by, to then end up dying basically in a wheelchair with motor neurone disease is unfathomable, really. But anyway, that's Bob Lee.